Hello! Our wonderful theorist that we chose is Virginia Henderson, who created the nursing need theory. Here, we have the great Virginia Henderson's definition of nursing. Her definition focuses on helping the patient to become as independent as possible. This means the nurse takes a more supportive role. We'll dive deeper to this in the following slides. Virginia Avenel Henderson, known as the mother of modern nursing. She was known to many as a kind, compassionate Southern gentlewoman. Born on November 30th, 1897, in Kansas City, Missouri, to Daniel B. Henderson and Lucy M. Abbott. Her father was actually an attorney for Native American Indians. Virginia was the fifth of 8 children. Her mother chose the name Virginia because it was a state that she was born in and she always wanted to return to. The family moved there when Virginia was 4 years old. In 1921, Virginia graduated from the Army School of Nursing and began working at the Henry Street Visiting Nurse Service for 2 years. In 1923, she began teaching nursing at the Norfolk Protestant Hospital, and in 1930, she became a nurse supervisor and clinical instructor at a hospital in Rochester, New York. She received her bachelor's degree in 1932 at Teachers College, and then went on to get her master's degree there as well in 1934. She stayed on at Teachers College as faculty until 1948. And in 1939, Macmillan Publishing Company asked her to write a new 4th edition of the Harmer textbook, which she proudly took on. Starting in 1953, she was a research associate at Yale, and this is where her career really took off. From 1955 to 1978, Virginia wrote numerous major publications. Her written works include the textbook of the Principles and Practice of Nursing, 5th edition, Basic Principles of Nursing Care, which was published in 29 languages by the ICN, or the International Council of Nurses, Nursing Research, Survey and Assessment, and Volume 4 Nursing Studies Index. Now, this was a 19-year research project where she gathered, reviewed, cataloged, classified, and cross-referenced every known piece of nursing research published in English. She then went on to write Nature of Nursing, where her theory was introduced, and lastly, The Principles and Practice of Nursing, 6th edition, which was written when she was 75 years old. She received honorary doctoral degrees from numerous universities such as Yale, Emory, Old Dominion, and many more. In 1979, the Virginia Henderson International Library was created by a Nursing Honor Society, Sigma Theta Tau, which was in Indianapolis. The library's primary focus includes unpublished studies, dissertations, and information presented at conferences. In 1985, she was given the first Christiane Raymond Prize from the ICN. This prize is awarded to nurses who have made a significant impact on the nursing profession internationally or through the nursing profession for the benefit of humanity, which she definitely did. On March 19, 1996, Virginia Henderson passed away at 98 years old. It was said that her ending had the warmth, style, and graciousness of her life. After eating some chocolate cake and ice cream and saying goodbye to her family and friends, she passed away. She's buried in the family plot at St. Stephen's Church in Virginia. What exactly is Virginia Henderson's theory? Well, it's called the need theory, or the nursing need theory, and its focus is on nurses helping individuals achieve independence and meet their basic needs, which she believed were essential for maintaining health and recovering from illness. Her theory emphasized the importance of individualized care, where nurses understand and respect each patient's specific needs. She identified 14 components that represent the essential human needs. I have them pictured here in the PowerPoint, but just to name a few: breathing, eating, moving, sleeping, maintaining personal hygiene. The list goes on until 14. The ultimate goal is to help patients regain the ability to take care of themselves or to assist themselves when they can't, so they live as fully as possible, whether they are healthy or ill. Her approach sees nursing as a way to enhance quality of life through compassionate, patient-centered care.
There are 4 basic principles to Henderson's meta-paradigm in the need theory. The first has to do with nursing. So the nurse's role is to assist individuals with activities they would perform alone, but they need help with. So helping with strength, knowledge, or will. The nurse helps the patient meet their goals and then promotes independence with performing these goals. Second is health. So Henderson defines health as the individual's ability to function independently in relation to the 14 needs that are outlined. Health is a dynamic state that involves physical, mental, and emotional well-being, and this relates back to the independence that nursing promotes. Third is person. So the patient is viewed holistically. While the nurse is promoting these 4 principles of the meta paradigm, the nurse realizes that the patient is not just one diagnosis or thing, but they're a whole person with many needs. And her theory suggests that the patient requires assistance to reach interdependence, integrating the biological, physiological, spiritual, and sociological dimensions of health. The fourth is environment. So this has to do with also viewing the patient holistically when promoting interdependence and independence. Henderson emphasizes that nurses must create an environment conducive to health by removing dangers and promoting conditions that allow patients to meet their basic needs independently. Her theory does not focus extensively on the community or broader social factors, but highlights the immediate patient surroundings.
Virginia Henderson identified 3 assumptions that she used as the building blocks of her needs theory. The first of these is that nurses care for a patient until that patient can either independently care for himself or herself, or care for them until they have a meaningful and profound death. The second is that nurses are willing to serve and devote themselves day and night to their patients. And the third is that nurses should be educated at the college level in both the sciences and the arts. The needs theory was founded on the principle that the mind and the body are inseparable and interrelated at all times. Henderson believed that a patient is the sum of parts with mandatory biophysical needs rather than a client or a consumer of a service. She believed that the nurse is to carry out the physician's medical plan, but the individualized care is the result of the nurse's plan based on the nurse's assessments of 4 components. These 4 components are the following. Biological. This is the physical being. It includes a patient's age, gender, anatomy, physiology, genetic makeup, and chemical balance. The second is psychological. This is the person's mental and emotional wellness, emotional status, cognitive variables, self-esteem, and mood. The third is sociological. These are interpersonal factors, such as the person's home situation, community involvement, economic stability, and relationships. And the fourth and final is spiritual. This is a person's perceived purpose, values, religion, and introspection. There are a few elements of interrelation between the concepts of the needs theory. First is the individuality of patients. As we mentioned in slide 6, the nurse has a responsibility to assess the patient to determine whether he or she requires certain things based on their physical, social, biological, psychological, and spiritual attributes. The second is the nurse's role. Henderson believed that this role of a nurse was to work alongside a physician as a complementary role rather than under a physician. The role of the physician is to cure, whereas the role of the nurse is to care. The third is independence. These 14 basic needs that we have previously identified can be compared to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was established in the same time period. Here we can see a physical picture of Henderson's needs theory. In diagram A, we can see that it blends fairly seamlessly with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not clearly explained if Maslow's hierarchy of needs or Henderson's 14 basic needs had any influence on one another. However, diagram A does depict how Henderson's 14 basic needs fit seemingly into the hierarchical categories created by Maslow. When we take a look at diagram 2, we can see how Henderson's theory of needs can be played out in a variety of scenarios. When referencing her assumptions that the theory of needs was founded on, we can clearly see how they are applied in this theory. According to Henderson, the nurse's role is to care for an individual. That care can be focused on getting a patient to a state of being able to perform the 14 needs independently, or as she described, health, or that care can be focused on helping the patient achieve a meaningful death.
Hey everyone. So now that we understand Virginia Henderson's basic theory of needs and the 14 basic needs, we just want to take that and kind of flip it back to you guys and have you apply it in the setting of a simple patient case study. So Lil Nas X is taking a break from his tour, even though he's only 9 years old. He's got asthma, has got a little rhinoentero, so it puts him in the hospital. He's otherwise fully supported at home, financially, psychologically, socially. So the reason for this case study is to highlight how his 14 basic needs would be much simpler to fill than a more complicated patient, which we'll highlight later on in the presentation. So, if Lil Nas X can otherwise, he can feed himself, he can go to the bathroom, he can walk around, he's got his family around to play, breathing normally is right. Let's put him in the hospital first off, but we're handling that. So we have nursing and medical interventions for that. He's able to sleep. He can move around, ambulate appropriately. He can communicate fine. So this is just a quick little summary of how a patient that is otherwise simple, stable, previously healthy, if they're not in need of extracurricular, higher level of care, they would be otherwise pretty simple to handle.
There's a multitude of fundamental philosophies and influences that aided Henderson's work. For example, psychology was a big influence in Henderson's theories. She was pro-universal healthcare and believed that the for-profit healthcare industry is absurd because it does not meet the basic needs of everyone that needs healthcare. She believed that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. Quote, unlike Nightingale's model, which was based on prescriptive understanding of care, Henderson believed that nurses functioned as an extension of the patient. So patients that are unable to advocate for themselves, that are unable to get healthcare on their own, they still deserve to be cared for. So through her model, she outlines how all patients can be cared for no matter their ability to receive or get healthcare on their own. So how? By drawing upon past theorists such as Nightingale, Henderson was able to look at nursing in the current climate to enhance patient care. She was able to draw upon the findings and research that Nightingale did in order to enhance her own theories. She did this and was able to advance nursing and to enhance patient outcomes for nurses. Quote, the goal of nursing under Virginia Henderson's nurse theory is to help the patient in the way that they would help themselves if they were able to. She argued that nurses could reform health systems by encouraging patients to make medical decisions for themselves. Through her look at psychology and drawing upon other theorists such as Nightingale, Henderson was able to develop theories in order to help all patients become independent through the help of nurses.
All right, everyone. So now that we have an understanding of Henderson's theory, we're going to find a nursing study that uses the theory, and we're going to just kind of take a dive into it. So I got pretty creative here and went into Google and typed in, scholarly article, utilizing Henderson's nursing model. And so this popped up. So this study, an individual with scleroderma's evaluation according to the Henderson nursing model, is a study that looks at one patient, 56-year-old female, who's in the hospital suffering from this chronic disease, scleroderma. And what the researchers listed below, what they do is they assess the woman, apply Henderson's theory of needs to her, and then kind of just write everything out in terms of how to improve this patient's life, create independence, help her with ADLs, and just improve overall outcomes. All right, guys, so before we dive in, if you didn't know what scleroderma was, like I didn't, got this little fact sheet here. Essentially, it's just a chronic disease thought to be autoimmune that causes an excess collagen production, and it leads to thickening and tightening of skin. But in the different types of it, in which case the woman in this study has this systemic scleroderma, it affects multiple organ systems. So just take this in really quick and then kind of brainstorm as to how you'd think this condition could affect her in relation to Henderson's 14 basic needs. All right, so now we got our key elements of the study here. Threw the little periodic table in just to give everyone a little jump scare because I still got PTSD from chemistry. It's my least favorite class. Anywho, so in terms of what the researchers found when assessing this patient. Because, once again, she had pulmonary involvement, she had difficulty breathing. She was on oxygen for that. She was also actually a smoker, too, so of course that's going to exacerbate it. She had difficulty eating relating to the excess collagen that was produced, so much so that it affected how much she could open her mouth. So she wasn't really eating a lot, and she got full pretty quick. She needed assistive devices to walk around and even had trouble putting her own shoes on. In relation to the difficulty breathing, she had dyspnea with exertion, and she couldn't go for walks anymore. So her breathing alone affected her in multiple ways, ambulating being one of them. Because this study was done while she was in the hospital, she reported difficulty sleeping due to the hospital environment, being woken up, alarms, etc. We all know. Dry skin, one of the criteria for scleroderma, by the way, which is also called CREST syndrome, interestingly. And then lastly, Raynaud's is another one of the criteria for scleroderma. So this woman was cold a lot of the time, and so much so that the pulse ox would not pick up on her. So those are just some of the key assessment findings, elements that we're going to take, and we're going to formulate a plan utilizing Henderson's 14 basic needs. All right, so now that we have an understanding of the assessment findings in the study, as well as an understanding of Henderson's 14 basic needs, we're just going to take a pause here to look at a visual representation of what the researchers created in regard to Henderson's basic needs on the left that correlated to the patient, as well as the problems identified on the right. Similar to what you'd see in a care plan, in a chart. And what the researchers did was, after the problems were identified, then they listed different interventions that correlated to the specific problem, and then they evaluated those while the patient was in hospital. I mean, these ranging from oxygen as needed, keeping her in semi-Fowler's position, having her eat soft foods or liquid foods because she had difficulty eating, warming her foods, covering her with enough blankets, helping her with position changes, encouraging her to quit smoking, and just encouraging overall rest. And so there was numerous interventions that they listed in each category and numerous evaluations of such that they did. So what they essentially did was they took a step back, looked at everything, and then targeted each area, coming up with specific interventions. All right, so now we just have the key findings of the study, and the researchers really summed it up nicely here. The Henderson theory helps planning the care processes by scrutinizing all the problems of the patient and determining the problems, just as the researchers had done. So I included this baseball infield photo here because I think it's a great representation of how to approach problems, whether it's a simple patient case or a more extensive case. But when the patient's up to bat, right, there's a problem. By us identifying the problem that gets us to first base, we implement an intervention that brings us to second base. We evaluate the intervention, that's a triple. And then if we can improve the patient's health or quality of life or any outcome, then that's a home run in my book, even though I'm not a coach or barely played baseball. Anywho, I just think it's a great representation, great visual for understanding how the process worked and specifically how the researchers applied it in the study mentioned. All right, so next we're going to take a look at parsimony. And, okay, it's not a parsnip or persimmon or the marriage of the two. All right, just give me 1 second here. Okay, here we go. Parsimony is actually, according to Oxford Reference, the principle that the most acceptable explanation of an occurrence, phenomenon, or event is the simplest, involving the fewest entities, assumptions, or changes. Now that's the definition of it as it relates to research. But what does that really mean? All right, if Parsimony were a rock band, I would say they'd be Kiss. And really, when I researched and kind of thought about parsimony, it's really the KISS principle. And so what I mean by that, keep it simple, silly, which was actually coined by the Navy in the 1960s. So what it is it's about simplifying a complex problem, giving the most broad explanation before you get to a more complex, intricate description of it. So another way of looking at this is kind of just zooming out from a concept, theory, situation. And so when we discussed Henderson's 14 basic needs, we also touched upon different concepts that are within that. So, almost like Russian eggs, it's another subset of ideas that represent the overall arching theme. All right, example 2. So, first off, shout out to The Hangover, one of the greatest comedy movies of all time. But I put the GIF in here for a reason, because situations like this happen all the time in hospital. And what the example is your intubated patient is attempting to communicate with you. They start to become agitated and frustrated. How do you communicate with them? And so for anyone that's taking care of a patient with a breathing tube, you kind of just run through a little bit of the troubleshooting that would coincide with agitation of the patient based on their assessment history, why they're there. But you can really apply Henderson's theory to this. In my experience, I found a lot of times is that patients either they're uncomfortable, they want to be turned, their Foley might be pulling at them, they might have pain somewhere. Sometimes the patient says they have difficulty breathing despite being on the ventilator. I worked with kids primarily, and so a lot of them would say that they're scared. So and then other times they're just doing backflips in the bed because turns out kids and ketamine don't mix well sometimes. But the Henderson theory is helpful because it really helps kind of broaden the perspective when applying it to different cases. Another one that I didn't mention that I really love in the hospital is communication boards. And so, if I was a researcher and I going in a hospital and we have a patient that's been intubated for a long time, and they're having trouble communicating, just as the researchers did for the woman with scleroderma, I would say, all right, well, this patient has trouble communicating. Let's make a communication board. And with kids, as I'm sure with maybe adults even, we just had pictures of things. I'm hungry, I'm in pain, I'm scared. And so that's one of the interventions that I would write, I would implement, and then we would see how it works. And man, isn't it amazing how sometimes it works, depending on the age. So I just wanted to keep this example in the PowerPoint because it's just a reminder that, even if something as complex as trying to understand someone who may be medicated or, grossly incapacitated otherwise, you could still zoom out, look at the situation, and figure out little ways to help improve their outcome. All right, so now we're just going to pivot here to a middle range theory, which I used Michelle's reconceptualized uncertainty in illness theory. She had actually published an uncertainty in illness theory a few years earlier, and then reconceptualized the theory itself. And so the reconceptualized uncertainty in illness theory was developed to address the experience of living with continuous uncertainty, specifically in the setting of a chronic illness. And so it's broken down to 3 major concepts: the antecedents, appraisal, and outcomes, as you can see on the chart here. Of course, you get diagnosed with something, and there's an adjustment period to that. You don't know how it's going to go. You look to see how the patient responds, and then the results of that response. So that's just a broad explanation of the uncertainty and illness theory by Michelle. So we covered Michelle's theory broadly, and on here you can see how she kind of crafted her theory. She was actually studying psychology, read some literature, and from there formed her theory. But it relates to Henderson's basic need number 10 of communicating emotions and fears. And so the whole goal, right, whether it's Henderson or this uncertainty and illness theory, is to help the patient become as independent as possible, to implement an intervention, evaluate it, and improve the patient outcome, and help their ability to cope and adapt to that illness, so that we could see improvement. So I thought this was a good example of just kind of the overlay of the basic needs, as we've seen with Henderson or Maslow's hierarchy. Really the need for self-empowerment of not just the physical being, but the psychological, spiritual, emotional, so on and so forth. Thank you everyone for taking the time to look at our presentation. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe down below, and look forward to speaking with you guys on the discussion posts.